Hi, Mike. Welcome to Into the Mind of Music.
Yes, John, thank you for having me.
Hey, what was it like growing up as a kid? Were you around a lot of music when you were young?
I really wasn't. I grew up actually, I didn't grow up in New Jersey. I grew up in a small town in New York State. Um, and if you look at, I mean, if you're familiar with New York State at all, or
Oh, yeah.
any of the listeners, it's very far southern border. In other words, if I could walk literally a 3-minute walk from the house I grew up in this one direction, I'd be in Pennsylvania. But it was the closest, what I'll say, cultural place was Ithaca, which is where Cornell University is, which was about 40 miles north. So I would go to concerts there. And early on, when I got into the jazz mode, I would go up there, buy jazz records. But there wasn't much there, and the town, to a certain degree, hasn't changed too much. In fact, I have two siblings; they still live there. But there was nothing there for me. I wanted to play music, and but so that's, I guess, to answer your question, there wasn't a lot. I had to seek out a lot of stuff. Um, but I heard the stuff that really inspired me, which was popular, Queen and Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin. That was easy to find.
And the whole Motown era at that time,
Oh
too.
yeah,
Like,
Motown.
when the stuff that was on the radio. Like I was talking with somebody else, and we were saying that, when we were growing up, there was a real wide variety of stuff being played on the radio.
Yeah,
You'd hear like a classic rock song, and then you'd hear like a Motown song, and it was kind of just like a mixed bag, which was kind of cool.
yeah, there was no radio, so compartmentalized. And then they had what is it we used to call it, album radio. They which was, I guess, it was more classic rock. That's how I remember it. But I thought it was referred to as a album type stations. Um, that's where I first heard the Allman Brothers on one of those kind of stations.
Yeah, where they'll play the whole side of like
They
Mountain
played a whole
Jam.
side, and it was this new band, and that was a big influence too. Allman Brothers for sure.
So how'd you migrate to New Jersey?
I mean, I went to Berkeley, and I made friends up there with a couple guys that are from here. In fact, well, we've talked about this. I got to be really good friends with David Brew, and that's how I ended up down here. We were gonna, I played a lot with him up there, and then his roommate at the time, Tom Baker. You know that name, Tom Baker, drummer?
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
Did he play on Vinny's Partisi's
he
record
did.
with
He
you?
did, isn't he? He
Yes.
did.
Yeah, it was you and
And
him that played on that. That
so
was a great record.
I go way back, way back with those guys. It never materialized. Dave started, things started taking off for Dave, even on the local scene. He was doing weddings, and he started working right away and didn't really need to put any time into, hustling gigs. He was getting called for stuff. And for me, it took me a little while to get some things going where I was at least playing.
So let's talk about Berkeley. What about your experience at Berkeley? This Berkeley College of Music in Boston, for anybody
Yeah.
who wants to
I mean,
know a little more for him.
I actually finished. That was a deal I made with my father. He said, look, if you're going to go, and he helped me, pay for it. I had student loans and stuff, but he said, look, I want you to get some kind of piece of paper. I ended up with a performance degree, but I took some elective type courses, like an English course here and there. And it was a great experience for me. I mean, the main thing, honestly, it got me out of where I lived, this area, because I mean, there was nothing. I mean, all through high school, I played a lot, rock bands, and but you know, it's like anything. You get to a certain point, and you've kind of maxed out the scene, and things change, and so it was a good, honestly, it was a good move for me, and I learned a lot, met a lot of great musicians. Um,
You know, a lot of people say it's really the best thing about going to any college for music. Put aside the education, and you know, it's a big networking community, and you get to meet other great musicians, and then that winds up helping you sometimes later on in your
sometimes
career. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it does, though. Yeah.
there's, you know, there's times even now I'll be on Facebook and I'll see a name pop up, friend of a friend, who's someone I mean, it's not someone I knew especially well, but we would end up jamming. I did a lot of jamming. Um, you know, learning how to play, at least learning how to play jazz, which was what I got interested in.
And
And I
you,
will say, I had a great gig. By the time I was there for a few years, it was really probably one of the best experiences I ever had. I played this and it lasted for about 7 months, every Friday, Saturday, and twice on Sunday at this place called Wally's. So anybody who knows the jazz scene in Boston would know that. And we had the gig. I mean, actually, the band I was with was a sub band for the guys who actually had the gig. But we were there, I'm telling you, 7 months, you know, and you'd get $10 a night. And Sunday afternoon was a jam session. And then it was like a gig Sunday night. But I learned so much. And Ralph Moore, I don't know if you know that name, great tenor player, who actually was my roommate. He was the band leader. It always, there'd be a couple different drummers. One guy started off doing the gig. He was there all the time. Then he got like a show band or something. So he would bring different people in. But then classic, you know, we went there to play one Friday night and the place was locked up, closed. They reopened, and they might have reopened shortly after, but I mean, that was it for me. But it was great. I learned a lot of tunes, and just, you know, it was a great thing to have experience in those days.
so what made you choose guitar? Why are you a guitar player as opposed to like a sax player, or keyboard player, or any other instrument?
I think it was an accessible instrument. I think early on I did have, for a short, probably a real short time, I did have an interest in playing bass. But I ended up getting a guitar, and then I heard there was I remember this, there was three things, what I'll call my early revelations, right? Hearing Clapton play Crossroads, seeing B.B. King on American Bandstand, right? And I think he was lipping it, but he had The Thrill Is Gone, which I think was a hit. And then I remember I heard that, you remember that record Super Session? It was Mike Bloomfield and Al Cooper.
No, but I know Mike Bloomfield and Al Cooper, of course. I know the two names. Yeah.
You know, three blues-oriented kind of
Uh-huh.
things, and it's just like, and then of course the Allman Brothers the blues really spoke to me, and it was a big inspiration trying to play at that when I was in my teens.
Yeah, I think that's what happened kind of to like the 80s. A lot of the 80s rock, they dropped the blues.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was really bad for rock. But
I mean, you know, so,
you know, hey, I mean, I'm not putting those bands down. I mean, they had a different thing, you know, and there was a lot of great players and stuff like that involved with those projects. But yeah, I think they kind of took the blues out of rock.
yeah, and I think that's what. And then of course, in the midst of what we used to call them, hair metal bands, and
Hmm.
some of those guys could play the shit out of the guitar though.
Yeah,
And I and I
that's what
think
yeah,
I,
was
I think
saying.
I think Eddie, he always, I mean, I would read interviews, he would credit Clapton as an influence. I think Eddie had some kind of bluesy thing, but
Oh yeah, Eddie Van Halen. Yeah, I mean, for sure. Eddie is one of the great improvising guitarists in
oh,
rock. If
brilliant.
anybody doesn't know it, I mean, Eddie's more than just like a hairband, one of these guys that comes and goes. He changed guitar playing
Oh,
for, there was guitar playing before Eddie and guitar playing after Eddie Van Halen. But no,
yeah,
but
he was.
Eddie Van Halen, there's guys, Slash still, he's throwing the blues in, but that was,
Slash
that
and
was
blues.
afterwards, like when I heard Guns N' Roses, I said, wow, finally a good rock band.
Yeah,
And I think it was because of Slash, because I heard the blues coming back,
I would totally agree with that.
you know.
But if you think about it, though, when was Stevie Ray Vaughan? His first record came out, and he was on a big label, right? Or I think in '83. I mean, he was doing something totally, and I think he was pretty successful. But he was a blues player.
Yeah, I think Stevie Ray Vaughan, I'll call him the Blues Hendrix.
Blues Hendrix, yeah.
you
Stevie to
know,
me,
not as
yeah.
rocky as Hendrix or psychedelic by any means. Stevie Ray was more, he's a blues player, but he rocked it up, man.
Oh,
You know,
yeah. Loved him.
phenomenal and a phenomenal improviser. You go see him on different nights, he's not going to play the same solo every night. I
Loved him.
mean, you go hear some of these bands and they just play the solo just like the record with
Yeah.
not too much because they don't have much space to do anything because they're more compositional songs.
Right.
Whereas the
Exactly.
blues is more of improvisation. And those rock bands, then they were, they had compositions, they had to follow it. The guitar parts were short. There was no jamming.
Um, Stevie for me is really it's Albert King. If you listen to Albert King,
Oh yeah, Albert King, sure.
Albert King,
Sure,
Steve
he plays a flying V, Gibson flying
flying
V
flying V, and he was a lefty that
is the
played the
upside
guitar.
down, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like
he
Hendrix,
just
the upside down thing, yeah.
yeah, he just
Yeah.
those the way he bent the notes. Albert was just, um, but that was Stevie was to me combination of Albert and Jimi Hendrix.
Didn't he do
Yeah,
something on TV with Albert King? It was Stevie
yeah.
Ray and Albert. They're sitting next to each other and they were
Yeah,
playing. That was
there was some
fantastic.
kind
If
of a
anybody wants to look that up, that was great.
yeah, and it got released audio wise, and I think you could probably find the DVD or something. Yeah, for sure.
So,
Um,
so Boston, the clubs in Boston, when you were up there, obviously, like you said, you were making like $10 a gig. Were there a lot of places that were
there,
happening? Was
there
there a
was
lot of
places there.
availability for students to play, or no?
Yeah, there was a few places. I mean, of course, people would play at the school. There was rehearsal rooms you could sign out at night. But there was the place called Pooh's Pub. Played there a lot. There was Michael's Pub. Played there a lot. There was a place in Cambridge called the Sunflower Cafe. I played there a bunch of times. And it took me a few years after being there to get where, like, okay, this guy, you know, everybody was kind of on the same level, learning how to play, but you go do a gig. It was at Sunflower Cafe. There was a place called Riles. Riles was a little more upscale, and I think I only played there one time. But I mean, it's not like in those days, not like I was playing one gig a week. I'd be playing a couple times a month because there was a lot of people vying for
Oh yeah,
And I
there's
and I,
total
and I
saturation with musicians up there for sure.
and really the only thing I didn't get any kind of chance to do any kind of commercial band. It just didn't come along. It did the last year I was up there
Well, you
because I
went to
would have.
Berkeley to study jazz, correct? Is that what happened? Like after being in the rock bands and everything, you got turned on to jazz and said, "Hey, I want to go to Berkeley," or did you
Yeah,
just say, "Hey, I just want to be a better musician," and went to Berkeley?
it's kind of a combination.
Combination, yeah.
And I was playing a lot. And, you know, I had to maintain a certain force load. And, so in the commercial gigs, there was a lot of commercial gigs too. You could get in a band and work 6 nights a week. I didn't really seek that out, but the last year I was there, I started doing more of those kind of gigs, playing less jazz, kind of the stuff I did when I ended up down here for a long time.
Yeah. Well,
But
that was when the city was really happening. We had a conversation a while ago about that too. Like, the New York City scene back then, that was happening too. Seventh Avenue South, Sweet Basil's, McKell's, and all of that. The Brecker Brothers playing, and
I went there a million times.
Steve Gadd and that stuff, and everybody uptown at McKell's, and
Oh yeah,
wow, what a time! And all of the real heavy jazz weights at
the
the Village
Vanguard.
Gate and the Vanguard.
Yeah,
They're all gone,
and then the blue,
gone.
the Vanguard's still there. The Blue Note is still there, but a lot of yeah, I mean, and
Yeah, the
now
Blue Note will always be there.
it
The
will.
Blue Note will always be there because the Blue Note is for the real upper echelons in the jazz world, like names like Chick Corea and
Yeah, Chick, you'd see Chick. In fact, Chick a couple of years in a row did a month there right around, if I recall, right around Christmas and New Year's. And
I wanted to go.
he would have a different band every week. Trio, had the electric, you know. But that's a real high end place. Now I think it's very expensive to go there. I couldn't even tell you. But um,
The
then
last
these
time I was there, I saw Ron Carter.
that would have been great. I saw Ron Carter at a place called, was it Bradley's? Or what was the other place? You remember you ever go to Bradley's?
No, but I remember hearing the name. I've never been to Smalls either. I hear that's a good jazz
Smalls.
club
I played once at
in
Smalls
the
quite a long
city.
time ago. Bradley's was this little place that was in the village section, and it was duos, bass, piano, but everybody was there. I saw Ron Carter there a couple times, Kenny Barron there a bunch of times, but I saw Ron at this. What was the name of this other place? Knickerbocker, which was over by Columbia University. I saw Ron there. God, I can't remember who was playing piano. Again, I'm talking the '80s now. When I would go in and you know um, see a lot of music in those days. I was just starting to do like club dates out here, so I would usually be booked on a Saturday night. But there, and then occasionally you get a Friday night gig. I would do something, but there wasn't. I was just kind of working my way into any kind of steady stuff. But and I don't know if you remember, Ron Carter had a quartet, which really was a band. He was playing the cello, and Buster Williams played bass, and Kenny Barron and Ben Riley. I saw that band once too at Fat Tuesdays. You remember that place?
Fat Tuesdays, yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I went there a bunch of times. So, I mean, now, I haven't been to one of those clubs in ages. It's expensive.
Yeah, I can't afford to go to any of them either. That's the only reason why I don't go. I look and I go, oh man, I'd like to go see that. And then I start thinking, cha-ching, 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 the train,
Yeah,
the
you train.
subway,
Yeah, you train. You don't want to. I
uh,
wouldn't really want to drive in.
you know,
Um,
uh, And then if you drive in, it's all the tolls and the turnpike and the taxes, and then by the time you park, it's like $40 just to park, and then it's crazy. It turns out to be a couple $100 day just to go
It,
see a decent
it
club
does.
band at the in the city. But it is worth it once in a while. I love
Oh
doing.
yeah.
Mm.
Oh yeah. There's some guys now, younger jazz guys who are really killing it that I really need to go see. Um,
Yeah, I haven't been to the city, and I haven't been into the city scene for a really, 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 really long time. So I really
I
don't
do
know much of what's going on right now there. I
I do
just know
try
a lot of
and
places closed down and everybody moved to Brooklyn and Queens.
I think Brooklyn really is the guys who were up and coming. They're going to make their name playing, I think, in places in Brooklyn. Uh, I do try and keep up with the new guys. I mean, I actually pay a subscription to Apple Music, and so I follow, and they'll. I think they're pretty on it with the jazz, um, and I'll tell you, there's some great. The younger guys, they don't. They'll do, for lack of a better description, it's almost more fusiony in the sense it doesn't swing. A lot of odd meters, but acoustic based, right? Upright bass, piano,
Hmm.
and but odd meters um, and they don't play standards. I mean, you think about it, playing standards, how much better? I mean, are you going to get than Wes Montgomery? He wrote the book. It's like how much better
I look at it like when you do a standard, you're practicing to be a better musician because,
yeah, you're
like you
strictly
said, how do you play giant steps, better than John Coltrane?
yeah, yeah, you're trying.
You aspire to play to be as good, or you aspire to play better. So you play those tunes so that you can possibly reach those goals for yourself. But
Right.
um,
It's
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
it's a
it's a
yeah,
lost art playing the standards in the club, and it's for old people
yeah,
unless you do it in an inventive way, like
that's
you
true
know,
too.
if you do it in a new and exciting and inventive way, it can be wonderful. So
I think like the guy if I'm going to say who's the guy right now, jazz guitar, I would say this guy Mike Moreno. If you ever look him, and Mike is a modern player. He's got a bunch of pedals on the floor, but he will play a standard, and he'll do his own stuff, which again is odd metery kind of tune. Um, you'd have to listen, but man, he can play. Very, with that said, very much out of the tradition. Um, but doesn't sound like, you know, doesn't sound like Joe Pass. But obviously he did his homework,
right.
Um,
Yeah, that kind of thing. It's a touchy thing. I mean, I love it. I mean, when I hear, like a beautiful chord melody on the guitar, jazz chord melody or something like that, I always love it. Um, when things start getting
oh,
too fast and start getting too crazy, the average person doesn't have the attention span to really pay attention to jazz in that respect. I think it's more of a genre in the United States, and I'm not talking about Europe or Japan, I'm just talking about in the United States. Jazz is more, in my opinion, more for musicians, and musicians like it, and they aspire to get better, and they listen to jazz, and they listen to all these guys. But, and then they take it and twist it and turn it and come up with something else, and their that they would have never been able to do if they didn't have the jazz education background.
Yeah.
That's what I can't stress enough. Like a lot of people say, well, I don't want to be a jazz player. I don't have to learn this. Well, the better you are as a musician, the better you write in whatever genre you choose to. So
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, even going back mid 70s, I mean, you think about when Pat Metheny came along. To me, he's very much out of the tradition, but he totally took that music and had his own stamp. He's a brilliant writer. Still is absolutely killing it. You see him when he's on, just as a player. Him and John Scofield, too. John Scofield was another one who just like completely turned my head around. Because I kind of almost related to him kind of like as a rock player. He didn't have that traditional kind of sound, but he did his homework. You could hear the lines, but he made it fit. And I mean, anything he does, you could tell it's him. I've listened to him so much over the last literally 40 plus years. I can't listen to him anymore.
yeah,
I mean, you say who's your favorite guitar player? If somebody said that to me, that would be the first name that would pop up in my head.
Scofield would be the first name. Who else?
Oh yeah.
Who else? John Scofield. There's something about John Scofield because I'm into the jam bands and I like the jam band scene because I like improvisation, whether it's in rock, whether it's in disco music, anything. Like there's a band called the Biscuits, and Mark Brownstein, bass player, what a great guy, wonderful guy. And the Disco Biscuits I don't really care for their kind of music, but man, they start playing and they play an hour, one song.
Yeah.
And it's all, improvising. And I mean, it is very, very cool. It's very cool, very fun. And a lot of the jazz musicians that were starting to become popular, like John Scofield and Bill Evans, the sax player,
Bill Evans, yeah, sure.
Okay, well, they were coming over to the jam scene.
Oh yeah, smartest
John
thing.
Scofield played with a lot of the jam bands, and the sax player that I just mentioned, Bill Evans.
Bill Evans, yeah.
Yeah, he had his own. He had his own jam band himself. That they do like fusiony stuff, and they jam out, man. So
you ever heard? You ever heard?
Yeah. The jazz to play jazz anymore. I mean, even the great jazz guys are coming over to the jam scene because it's the only place they can improvise.
When I saw John like making inroads in that scene, I said, man, that's the smartest thing he could ever do because he can fit right in. And those guys are gonna, I mean, I really do. And I like all those bands, but maybe in my sort of, maybe I have blinders on to a certain degree, but I would have to think John's kind of a cut above some of those guys, even though
He's a
really
cut above some of them, but not all of them.
Not, yeah. But, and Government Mule, like Government Mule, you into Government Mule, Warren Haynes?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I was just going to bring that up. I was just going to bring up Warren and John Scofield.
Great.
Warren really enjoys John Scofield's playing. And I'm sure John Scofield really enjoys Warren's playing.
Oh.
And they're totally different guitar players in my mind. And I hate to be negative, but I'm going to say that John Scofield and Warren Haynes is the worst combination of two guitar players I ever heard.
Yeah, of course.
I hate to say that.
It's funny.
I'm coming off of listening to Warren and Derek.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's not the same. But, Warren played with Derek for 25 years. So, what
long
I
time.
just said is really not fair.
Well, they did that one record. What was it called? Skull Mule.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's about 10, probably the better part of 10 years it came out. And I remember, it's funny. I can get it on the phone, iTunes or something. But I remember I listened to it. It just didn't really hit me. And I really expected this because I love both those guys.
Oh, I love both of them too. I love both of them too, and I know that they both respect each other, and they're two
Oh,
probably the greatest guitar players in the world, but they're on totally different spectrums, and I didn't
yeah.
think that it worked.
And Warren, was so good with the Allman
Like,
Brothers, and he's
yeah, and
great.
Sco could play with a lot of it. I mean, he could play with anybody. He could play with any musician in the world. He's brilliant, but I just, hey, everybody's got an opinion. It's like everybody's got a button. You know what they say. Opinions are like, but I didn't care for those two together. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Separately, I thought they were phenomenal, but together they really didn't hit it off to me.
Yeah. I listened to the recording. I think I listened to it once and probably and maybe it didn't even register like what you just said, but I think if I was to listen now, I might feel the same way. But man, Warren too, he's another one of my favorites. Great slide player.
Mm-hmm.
He's a great writer too. I mean, he's got
Oh,
tunes.
Warren Haynes is a great all-around everything. He's a very good singer. He's a very good guitar player. He's a very good writer. He's a great band leader. He was a member of the Allman Brothers probably longer than, I mean, way longer than any of the original guys.
I think he might have been. He was there a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, he came in to play slide after Dwayne died. He was, I thought.
Well, no, he came. You know what? He was
Or did he
there.
come in afterwards?
He came in. He got hooked up with. So the Allman Brothers stopped at some point in the '80s. They didn't do anything, and then but Dickie Betts had a band, the Dickie Betts Band,
Mm-hmm.
and Warren was in the band.
Oh.
There's a couple records, and then I think it was either in 1989 or 1990 the Allman Brothers reformed, and at that point, I think Dwayne died in '71, but then it was Warren, and it was J-Mo and Butch Trucks.
Yeah.
And Alan Woody was the first bass player who died.
That's right. Yeah. I don't know. They had a few bass players, and
Oh yeah,
I didn't know who they were. When they came back, I wasn't interested in them. That's when I first started getting into jazz, and that's all. My life was just consumed with jazz records and studying in the city and
see,
trying.
I went through that period.
I shut out all other music besides only jazz.
I did that period from like 75 to about 80, 84. That's the only thing I listened to. And I, at that, by late 79, I was here. And 1980, I started getting some gigs. And it was all commercial gigs. So I would have to listen to stuff. But my musical interest to learn and to listen was strictly just jazz. I missed so much stuff. I went, now I go back, the 70s period, Clapton. And I mentioned Rob Shaw, who I think studied with you.
Oh yeah, Robbie, the bass player, yeah.
He used to, and I got to know him. And he said, "Oh man, you got to listen to Maiden and those bands." And I just kind of went. But now I've gone back and listened to him. That's from his generation. Rob is like 10. He's definitely 10 years younger than we are. Maybe.
Nah, he's probably like 20 years younger than we are.
No, I think he's 50. He's in his early 50s by now. All those guys might be 50.
Yeah, he looks younger than that, I guess. He looks like a rock star. He's real tall. He's got the long
He's always
hair.
had that look, and he was always into it. And he just, I think early on he decided that's what I'm going to play. I'm a rock player. He didn't really venture out, you know, but he
Yeah,
did study with you.
yeah. He comes to me for lessons every couple of years. He'll come for one lesson or so, and I'll give him something, and then I'll say, okay, I'll see you again, and then he, well, last time I saw him, I called him back. I said, hey, you gonna take another lesson? He's like, oh, I don't know, man. I'm still working on what you gave me last time.
Yeah, and what you gave him.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much he's playing. He was playing with Chris Koch, who we talked about also.
Oh yeah.
Chris was a good player. I met both those guys a long time ago.
Chris
late
used to
80s.
come and sit in with us with Kevin and company with the
Right.
little trio and whatever. And sometimes when Ronnie couldn't make it, he would fill in. Yeah, he was real busy. He's real busy. Great guys. I mean, we have so many great, musicians that are, I don't want to say in our circle, but just part of New Jersey. And,
yeah,
it's cool. It's like a one big family,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then if you get lucky enough, there's, you get involved with a group, whether it's a band or whatever, and the band's working. So, the idea was to try and just break into one of these other little cliques once in a while, just as something different. I managed to infect a lot of those cliques over the years. I mean, I would get to be a sub and got to know a lot of musicians over the years.
Yeah, you are the side man that everybody counts on to come in and,
yeah.
No rehearsal, no nothing. Mike, we're doing these tunes. Come on in, and boom, and then you're there, and they know you do a great job. So, yeah, so that's all wonderful. Hey, I know you do a thing with, or you were. I don't know what's going on with it now, but yeah, we talked about Ricky Collins.
Oh yeah, Ricky, I got to know.
The great singer.
Great singer. I got to know, I was playing, now another group of musicians I got involved with. So I was playing this guy, Gordon James, trumpet player, who always kind of did this early on, the smooth jazz thing. So he would get these gigs. In those days, there was places in New Brunswick, the Stagecoach, the Old Bay.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there one night, and Jeannie Bryson came in, the Stagecoach, and she basically hired that band. Although she had John Bianculli as her keyboard player, but she brought me. Who was playing drums? But I started playing a lot with her, and that's how I met Ricky. Jeannie Bryson, I'm pretty sure we were the first band that started playing at the Old Bay when it first opened. And this would have been in, I'm going to say 1988. And we were there every Thursday and it started off with me, Jeannie, John Bianculli, and there was different drummers. And John there's no bass player. He wanted to try the left hand thing. He's a good, good left hand. And that was another group of people they had a fair amount of work too. They would get some private stuff, but it was playing. I could stretch out. It was a playing gig, and it was there every week. I was doing weddings and stuff on the weekends, so that was a great. And then, man, Jeannie. I guess the last. I haven't worked with Jeannie. Jeannie kind of got out of it.
Actually, Jeannie Bryson was when I remember when I was first going to school for music. I even remember her name, like when Kenny Barron was teaching at Rutgers.
Yeah, she was a Rutgers
all of that.
student.
and her and John Bancooli, who is a wonderful keyboardist.
Oh yeah.
Both of those names I've always heard. I never had the pleasure of working with either of them. But I guess if you want to play jazz, it's really good if you have a good singer,
Yeah.
because that will allow you to work if you want to play that kind of music, I think.
Yeah. And then that group of people expanded. So eventually Charles Collins became the drummer because Jeannie wanted to step it up. She wanted to get some other kind of gigs, basically that paid more, less jazz oriented. So Charles, you know that name, Charles Collins, is Ricky's brother.
Charles Collins was a uh, he was in the background. He was a studio musician, and he
Oh
did
yeah,
a lot of the Sound of Philadelphia stuff,
a lot of it.
and he
Yeah,
did a lot of the first disco stuff. And
yeah,
um, yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting him, and when I talked to him, he said basically, I lived on the New Jersey Turnpike, going back and forth doing sessions between Philadelphia and New York. He said he was on
yeah.
the Turnpike most of the time of his life during that time. And he played on hundreds of records and sessions and stuff like that.
He
And
did.
yeah, so the singer that we're talking about is his brother,
This is
Ricky
brother Ricky.
Collins.
And Ricky, I got to know from that group. And then he also was playing with this group on the shore, the Jazz Lobsters. And they were really busy.
Mm-hmm.
So getting to know Ricky, I would sub with those guys. And that's how I got to know, well, actually, the Line Drive guys, because I was part of that band for a while.
Yeah, that was another great band, Line Drive. You played at my one of my good friends' weddings, and
The
yeah, that's actually where I first heard of you. That's where I
I
first heard your name.
the first line driver, I guess I can call him, that was Gary, the drummer, who was really one of the original guys who started that band. And I met him on a gig with Jeannie. A friend of Jeannie's worked with Gary's wife. At that time, what did Gary's wife do? I can't remember. So she said, look, I know this great drummer. And then actually Jeannie became a fan of Line Drive. She would go down and see them, and I don't know if you ever saw those with Jose. He was the singing the front guy.
I think
So
that was the guy that you played the wedding.
Oh, it would have. Oh
parade,
yeah,
because
in those. Oh yeah, it would have been Jose.
yeah, I mean, I'm going back.
It would have been 90s.
I'm not even going to say how far back I'm going back, but yeah, it was probably Jose.
Oh yeah, and so Jeannie got to be personal friends with those guys. She would go up and sit in with them, but I didn't know any of those guys at that time. I had just started the meeting. Like I had met Rick, also the sax player, one of the original members from the Jazz Lobsters, because he was doing both. But then so I got to know Gary, because he played with Jeannie for about 6 months. And we were playing at the Old Bay. And also she would get gigs remember J. August Cafe?
Yeah, J. August in New Brunswick. Another place, right?
And there was this place on Easton Avenue we used to play. Like Gary I'm trying to remember who the first drummer was, because Gary would have been in between the first drummer and Charles. And then she brought Charles in, and they were really kind of trying to step it up a little bit. More corporate, private, become a wedding band,
So
still maintain.
You played with Ricky though, right?
Oh yeah, a lot.
Ricky, that's where I'm kind of trying to go with this.
Yeah, Ricky was on the gig at the Old Bay, so I got to know him, and then a little bit with the Jazz Lobsters. But then there was a lot of space where we were way out of touch. And now he has this band. It's the Motown. What do they call it? The Motown Review.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Jersey Shore guys, and I got to sub with them, and that was Jerry Carboy who put that together. So it's a set band, but I've subbed with that band a handful of times. It has been a while.
Oh, okay. So So you were a sub for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
And the
ultimate side man. When somebody can't make it, man, they know that they know that they can count on you to come in and save the day.
and the last wedding band I was in, there was this guy, he was a bass player from Monmouth County who played at one time when he was younger, decided to get back into it. He was kind of a good businessman. So he put a band together. He was getting gigs. I mean, he put the band together at the worst time. You know, the whole scene was just starting to die. Or if you were a mid-level type band, that was a clientele. You know, it was just, I don't know, economics changing, younger clientele, and you're not going to be able to book an old school style band. But Ricky, so I played with him, and it went on for about 5 years. I mean, the most he had like 25 gigs one year, which was pretty good.
Yeah.
But it would dwindle. But the last 2 years, Ricky was his first call singer. But, you know, he did, at the end, he'd have like, you know, 10 gigs a year, 5. And then he just basically threw in the towel. So that was my connection with Ricky.
Right.
You know, over the years.
The Motown Review, that's still together, right?
Yeah.
They'll probably be playing again when things open up and you can play again.
Yeah, and I talked to Jerry recently for the first time in a while. He lost his wife recently. And there's this film about Asbury Park, which I think it was done a few years ago, but I just happened to see it. It was on one of the PBS stations. I said, man, I got to call Jerry because he's interviewed quite a bit in this film.
Is that what they did, Regina Bell or something? I don't know.
Somebody
else, and
that was indirectly. I got that gig from Charles Collins.
Oh, you got that from Charles. Wow.
Well, Charles got a call to do a show for this guy named Gerald Alston. And Gerald Alston was the voice of the Manhattans. You remember the Manhattans, Kiss and Say Goodbye?
Oh, yeah.
And Gerald got a deal with Motown. And again, this is, late 80s. And he's still doing we still had to do the Manhattans because that was his bread and butter. But he was going to start doing his own thing. So we did a New Year's show, 88 into 89. And on the show was also Regina Bell. They were both managed by the same guy. She had a record out. His first record came out that year. And the guy she was married to at the time, Horace Young, sax player, he was Gerald's MD. So Charles got the musicians. Horace went in and we did, like an hour set with Gerald. And then Horace said to me, he said, look, Mike, why don't you do Regina's set with us? Because it was usually, she had a 5-piece band. She had 2 keyboards, bass, drums, and he was playing sax. But this was a big show. It was New Year's in New York. They said, look, there's guitar all over the record. I mean, R&B style guitar, muted parts and just playing with them. And that was great. I cleaned up that year. I made like $3,000 between the rehearsals and doing the gig, New Year's gig that year.
Wow,
that set me straight for the whole winter that year. You know what I mean? Like,
and like,
it's like,
it's so crazy, that it's a memorable experience. It's such a delight when you actually feel like you made what you were worth.
It was
because
great.
that only comes around for musicians once in a while, unless you're really lucky.
Yeah.
And we always remember the ones that paid the most,
So I think she kind of liked me, although she was a little standoffish with the band. I mean, she was on her way to becoming a star, but she was cool.
Mm-hmm.
So her and Horace, they were having problems in their marriage, so Horace had a chance he went to work with somebody. And I think they said, look, if we're going to stay married, let's not work together. Because she was starting to work a lot because the record was, and then she was getting ready to release what was her second record. So Horace called me up. He said, look, Mike, we'll do this. It would be either me or you. This is the schedule. This is what I can do. And I was ready to drop everything to do the gig. And then finally he dropped out completely. And then I officially got in the band the summer of '89. And they released her second record. And then we were, I didn't do anything the second half of 1989 all the way to the end of 1990. But it was a great gig because you know what? We would just go out on the weekends. I would get home during the week.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't doing much. Just never was able to hook up any local. I was dying for like a Wednesday night gig just to play something different.
Yeah.
And that lasted for me, that gig, right to the beginning of '94. Although first year and a half was really busy. '91, she had some personal issues. Wasn't much in '91. '92, same thing. '93, she put out another record. We worked quite a bit that year. And then '94, right at the end of '93, she said that Mark Michello? You know that name?
No.
Keyboard player? No, Mark's another guy, local guy, played millions of gigs, great musician. He became the MD. And she said to Mark, she said, look, Mike, I got to change it up. Well, it was the same band the whole time. And the one keyboard player, he got a chance. What did he do? He became the director of the Boys Choir of Harlem, which was a pretty prestigious gig. And he was a very great player. He had a master's, and he might even be Glenn Pearson. He might even be a PhD now. But that was his thing. I think he was an educator at heart, but he was a great player. He did the gig, and we traveled a lot. So that was it. So I did an early couple of shows early in '94, and then that was it. And then luckily I hooked up with just doing the weddings again, and joined Line Drive in '95, and that was a great run. That was a 10-year, and that band was busy.
Yeah, that was a great band. I used to like that band a lot. You played a lot of different stuff. I liked the Earth, Wind, and Fire, and you were doing a little bit more of the, the tougher stuff to play, stuff that we liked, and at that time.
Yeah.
We always loved the horns, anything with horns.
I think the thing about those guys, which kind of stood out among the Jersey Shore bands, even though those guys would go mingle with all the other musicians that were doing stuff, they weren't really what you would call a rock band.
No.
You know what I mean? It wasn't, it was commercial stuff and party music, and that's kind of always what they've done. And they started off as like an instrumental fusion thing in the early days, but I had a great run with them too. And now, Jose, we seem to get back together. We play one gig a year with Jose, and he's become a keyboard player. He's still like the front man, but in fact, I did a gig with Jose in June. One-off thing. It was a house party. It was just me and him, and I hadn't seen him in a while. And I got a text, one-off thing. It was nice, to have a gig this right now. So it was great to see him, and so
yeah, and it's just feels like home, feels like, oh yeah, this is nice and comfortable, because you used
Jose will kind of, he has his go-to tunes, for people that know him.
So what do you got going on? Do you have anything coming up as far as that you're looking forward to after this pandemic passes by and we can
I,
actually like start playing more than just outside gigs?
I hope there's something. I feel like my whole, and I'm sure I'm not the only guy who would say this, my whole past 35 years, it feels like it's that way of life is gone. I had a pretty good run the last couple of years. You know,
Yeah,
I was playing with Chris Morrissey, and Chris too. I can't say enough good things about Chris because I had a blast doing the gig because it was a rock band, which I hadn't done in a while. He let me rip it out, you know. It was a steady thing, and that came when the whole the last, like I mentioned, this bass player wedding band. So that thing ended, and I didn't have much going. I mean, I would get these little one-off calls. So I hooked up with Chris, and that was from Kevin Brennan. You know Kevin?
yes. Kevin Brennan is from he's from some shore town that escapes my mind right now.
Kevin was in Bradley Beach. Now Kevin is another
Bradley
guy.
Beach, right? He's from Bradley Beach. Great
Yeah,
bass player, great guy.
great guy. I met Kevin
Yeah, yeah.
in the early
Kevin's cool.
80s.
He's a cool dude.
Kevin really hooked me up with Chris, and I cannot say enough nice things about both those guys. So Chris, you know, but I did it for such a long time. We played the same place. It was great, and it was a blast. He had
It
some
was
great
Jack's, right?
musicians.
Down the shore. Jack's
Yeah, it was a
every
late night,
Saturday night.
and it was a late night, so there would be ways to you could do an earlier gig, and I'd fly in there 5 minutes before. I'd set up, and we'd start to play. It was great. But I got so, you know, it just I was starting to I started to get some other things going, and I was taking off, which he was good about. But so he said, "Look, I'm going to get this other guy when you're not here. Really good player, Doug McCullough. I don't know if you know Doug's name."
No.
So it just felt like it wasn't my place anymore. You know, I had, but everything, believe me, everything was totally cool. And there was some nights where me and Doug played, and I'll tell you, it was a gas because it was like a real, and he's a monster shredder. Really much different kind of player than I am. He's a good guy. He's
That's
a good
good.
singer.
Complement each other.
Oh, great.
Complement each other.
But it kind of just changed. Maybe it was me.
Yeah, sometimes things just run their course. Like
You know,
I'd love to be in Kevin and Company with Ron and Kevin and stuff, but after 7 years, it kind of just ran its course, and
you did
I
it. Yeah,
I felt like I needed something else,
yeah, yeah,
and it wasn't, and I love those guys, and they're great musicians. It's just sometimes when you're in something for a real long time, it just plays itself out.
right. The last really nice thing I hooked up with that had some action, so to speak. You know Bailey G? You know Bailey's name?
Bailey G, the bass player.
Bass player. Now he's from the Rob
Gee, wow!
Paparozzi.
Now I haven't heard his name in a long time, and he was a cool guy. He was always really nice to me.
He's good. You know, Bailey is a great. He's a bass player. He's a grooving, playing blues. So he had a band. He has a band. It's called Blue Soul, and it was Mitch Eisenberg was the original guitar player, and they had a place to play. They were playing at this place, Rod's, which was at the Madison Hotel. They were doing, I think they were there 2 weekends a month, and then it kind of, but when I got involved, because Mitch, you know, I think the same thing must have happened with Mitch. He did it for a long time, decided to move on. So Bailey called me, and that's like a real band. and it's great material. It's really not the kind of material you'd expect to hear at that place. That's like an older clientele that wants to hear real party kind of stuff. But so that was a real like breath of fresh air to get involved with those guys. And I have something coming up with them in August.
Oh,
But
good. That's
you
good.
know,
So if you can do it, if it's
the only way it won't happen is if it rains.
oh,
You
because it's
know,
outside, so that's good.
everything. Yeah, and I played a gig with them a couple of weeks ago, and both these things were booked prior to.
Right.
But what can I
Well,
say?
that's good. That's encouraging. It's better than nothing. It's better than
Yeah.
not doing any. I mean, the band that I'm in, I think we had a date coming up at the Homedale Winery in September,
Who
but
is that with?
I don't know if it's even going to happen or what
Is
we're
it
going to do.
is it the Fox Hollow Vineyards?
Yes.
It's a cool place.
Yeah.
Who are you there with?
I play upright bass in a band called Rockabilly Roadhouse.
Cool.
And we do all rockabilly music, and I play upright, and I do the slap thing,
Nice.
and dance
Oh,
around, and dance around the stage, and make try to make a fool out of myself.
Yeah,
No, I
yeah.
love it. I love moving the bass around. I love spinning it and holding it like an electric, and yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah.
It's 145, like 200 BPM sometimes, but
yeah,
it's a lot of fun.
yeah. I mean that gig will happen because I see people doing stuff there now. I see it on Facebook, and
yeah,
I
but
played.
all of the guys are my age, and I think they're all paranoid, and I think none of them want it. I think none of them want any part of going out anywhere.
Well,
Yeah.
that part I don't know. I
So
think
that part I'm not sure about, but anyway. But yeah, hey, better days ahead, right? So
that's what
I'm
I've been.
glad to hear that you're playing. All right. Well, look, in closing, what would you tell a young cat who is just, say like maybe in high school thinking about going to college for music? What would you tell them?
I would say just try and um, expose yourself to as much as you can. I would definitely say get a presence on YouTube. That's really the thing now. Um, learn how to read. I mean, that helped me being able to do. Like now, I can still play. Like over the years, I would do a community theater show, one maybe two a year, and always tried. I mean, the shows. It was a little tedious going to the rehearsal. The same thing for the musicians. You'd be there the week of, and you'd be there 5-6 nights in a row between the rehearsals and then the first weekend of the show. So I always would get a little, being there for the rehearsals, but being able to read, expose yourself to a lot of different things. But then again, I think the people that are most successful are the ones that do find what they do. For me, I always kind of tried to do all this different stuff. I probably would have had a so-called better career, maybe. Of course, I dove pretty hard into jazz, I guess, but maybe I wanted to do a lot of different things, and I never really thought about being an artist. I liked being one of the guys in the band. That was really where I felt my niche was.
Yeah, me
So
too.
that's it. Maybe do what you have to do to be the artist.
But you suggest going to college if you
Yeah, well,
can, if you can
at least,
afford it.
yeah, at least learning. I mean, there's so many resources now, YouTube and people teaching, and I don't know if you really need to I mean, who does anybody need to go to college now and what's going on now with everything online? You think about it.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
seek and you shall find. I mean, you
yeah,
can ask Google anything, but you have to ask the right questions and you have to know
you do,
what to ask.
you do.
I think the internet and everything is fine. Um, I would just say that one-on-one private lessons with somebody who is way better than you are is a probably the quickest and best road that you could take. Um, Learning online is good, but nothing will ever replace one-on-one
No,
teaching. I
and yet,
That's just my opinion, and if you want to study bass, hey, I got plenty of openings.
yeah,
JohnThompsonBass.com for all your video lessons, because I'm
yep.
certainly not going out anytime soon.
The
Um, yeah, what else? So what else could we tell these guys to do?
I mean, I
Get a
still,
day job. Make sure you have a day job. If you come out of college and you can't and you can't find a gig right away, make sure you try to pursue
yeah, because
something else too.
yeah, because that's another thing that I kind of figured out. I've had other things going over the years, and early on, I had a lot of students, and I really just got so I didn't like. So I remember, again, this goes back to the 80s, and there was teaching in those days too was very good. There was a million students, a million gigs,
Oh yeah, I had quite a
but
few students back in the
it
day.
really, I'll tell you, it burned me out, and I didn't like starting my day. Even though I do Monday or Tuesday, which really wasn't going to be any gigs, but just the fact your day started at 3 in the afternoon when the young people were getting out of school. It just, after a while, I said, look, I just need some other kind of routine. So I
Yeah,
remember I was
yeah.
playing.
Teaching after so many years can get to you. I took a break from it, and it's good to take a break from things once in a while, and then you come back to it.
Yeah,
But really, I think th- did you ever study with somebody just like one-on-one besides? Well, obviously at Berkeley you had your teachers and you
I
had
did. Yeah,
private
I
lessons.
I I never studied with Harry. I think I'm the only guy down here. Never
Well,
connected
that's
with him.
because you were from New York at first. If you'd
And
been born in New Jersey, you probably would have studied with Harry Leahy.
oh yeah, no question. And I
Because
got to be
all of the
real.
great guitar players around here at least took a couple of lessons with Harry.
There was a period, also early '80s, where I got to know Vic Joris, and we got out of touch. But I lived in Summit in those days when I first came down here. Tom Baker and I were roommates. We rented this house in Summit. So Vic Joris was teaching at this place in New Providence. So, and you remember the place? It was called the Tavern on the Green in Morristown.
Sure.
So I was playing there one night, and Vic came in, and I said, "Oh man," But we got to be friends, and he said, "Look, I'm at the guitar. I think it was called the Guitar Center or the Guitar something in New Providence." And he was there, whatever day of the week it was. He said, "Look, come by. I'll get there. I start at 3, but I'll get there at 1, and let's play." It was very nice, and I did that for a long time, and we played a lot. We never played a gig,
Wow.
but
Of course,
I
I
learned.
studied with Vic, right?
I'm a lot of people, yeah.
Yeah, I studied with Vic for quite a while.
And he,
And then Vic was kind of like, he kept saying, "Well, what do you want to study with me for? You're a bass player, why don't you study with a bass player?" But I just used to like to go and play tunes with him, and then,
oh,
and he would help me out and everything, and that went on for quite a while. And then when I stopped studying with Vic, actually, I played relentlessly with like one of his top students, practicing jazz.
who was the student?
This guy, Elliot Baker, he
Oh,
studied,
Elliot, yeah.
Yeah, he studied with Vic for like 20 years, and
Yeah.
like he was still studying with Vic when I stopped. But you know, he was getting all of these charts from John Abercrombie and
Yeah.
from Borelli Lagrange and all of these things. And you know, I got a chance to see some chord structures of some newer jazz stuff and actually get a chance to play through it. And so it was a pleasure. And it all came from Vic, and everything came
Oh,
from Vic. And
the thing about Vic is early on, he had tremendous chops, you know, and that's kind of what he did. But his playing just matured so much over the years. He really just developed into this. He was really major guy that probably got a little overlooked. It got overshadowed certainly by John Schofield. Really came along and blew a lot of those guys career
yeah.
wise. But John, he wrote
Yeah, but
great
Vic
too.
was more of a John McLaughlin type player.
Yeah, I mean, he had those kind of
He
chops
had
and
the he had the John McLaughlin
whew.
Al Di Meola chops that he could just
Did
burn.
you ever cross paths with El Demila, John?
No, I never did. I never
You,
did.
you, you know, it's
And
funny.
I heard good and bad things about
Right.
Al, and but anything that I heard bad was like 30 years ago, and everything that I hear now is all great. That he's a
Oh,
wonderful guy.
he's put out 2 records recently, all Beatles tunes.
Yeah, he
They're
seems like a
great.
great guy. I follow him online, so I mean,
Man, it's great what he's done. And Al, I mean, his playing on electric guitar, he wasn't like my go-to. I mean, of course, I said, man, this guy can play the shit out of the guitar, no doubt. But I always thought he sounded great. To me, the best on acoustic. You know, what his thing really sort of resonated with me more so when he was playing acoustic. It was great.
yeah. Well, the two bands that changed my life were the Mahavishnu Orchestra and
Uh,
Return to Forever, and those
oh,
those two bands, along with Weather Report, are the staple of what
oh,
kind of
no.
music that I love. And
It took,
it just
yeah,
totally changed my mind. Those three bands totally changed my life,
yeah, the Mahavishnu
my
Orchestra for
music
me.
direction.
Oh, same with me. The Mahavishnu Orchestra is what I was a big Yes fan.
Me also. Yes, Genesis.
Yeah, I never played in what I would call a progressive band. I never got that real experience, but
I only did for a couple of months, but
I feel like from listening to Yes, even though I was a diehard Allman Brothers and the blues,
yeah.
I love this band. So that took me to the Mahavishnu Orchestra. Um, and I was like, holy crap, listen, like all of us. I mean,
Yep.
guys our age group, I think that name is going to come up if the jazz is in there somewhere, you know.
Well, listen, in closing here, we're kind of out of time, but in closing here, if anybody needs to get a hold of a guitar player or needs a guitar player, this is the guy to have right here, Mike Hogan. And it was great to have you on the show. And pretty
Thanks,
soon
John.
you're gonna be blacked out because you have no light from the sun is going.
John,
All right,
thanks
my
for having me.
brother. It was
Great
great.
talking.
It's great having you on the show, man.
Yep.
Peace.
I will see you.
Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
All right, ciao. Thank you very much once again for tuning in to Into the Mind of Music. Please click the subscribe button and ring the bell if you'd like to be notified when my podcasts come out, generally every Monday and Wednesday. I'll have my Linktree link in the description. You can click on that and get to all my social media. Until next time, peace, love, and music for all.